Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. I've played at almost every high-end venue in Manhattan, but the rooftop of the Mandarin Oriental was different. The skyline felt closer, the glass perimeter wrapped around the garden deck, and everything shimmered when the lights hit it right. They booked me for a wedding. A mid-tier event planner I'd worked with twice before texted 2 days prior, said the groom's parents wanted a live pianist but nothing classical. Just recognizable songs, mellow versions, nothing that would compete with the fireworks or skyline views. I said sure. By then I had stopped asking too many questions. I was freelancing full-time since January. No gigs meant no rent, and I was barely holding on to a tiny rent-controlled one-bedroom in Washington Heights. Used to teach at a private music academy uptown, before that closed during the budget cuts last fall. The city hadn't felt normal in years, not since the second flu wave that never got formally acknowledged. People just stopped talking about it. The public briefings were cut short. Reporting shifted to inflation, shipping delays, and energy. No one mentioned the small labs that kept popping up near the Bronx Zoo or the wild dog problem downtown. They didn't say much at all anymore. It was a cool night. Low 80s, some wind off the river. The setup on the roof was clean. Tables draped in beige cloth, lavender centerpieces, tea lights in glass domes. I had a real piano, baby grand, black, freshly tuned. No fake keyboard with tinny speakers. Someone had rolled out a Bluetooth system for ambient tracks and speeches, but the family wanted me live for dinner and first dances. I wore a black suit that didn't quite fit right anymore. My hands ached from an old bike accident I never got checked out, but I was playing well enough. Muscle memory does most of the work after a while. I had just wrapped up a set of slow pop ballads when I heard something hit the edge of the roof hard enough to make the glass barrier ring. It didn't sound like a bottle or tray, more like a sandbag dropped at an angle. Nobody reacted at first. A few people laughed. One woman raised her phone and zoomed in toward the park, thinking it might be a firework test or something overhead. Then a second object slammed down, followed by a third that spun feathers into the air. It took a few seconds before we realized they were birds, gulls or something close, moving too fast, slamming into the glass perimeter and planters. One hit the DJ's tripod-mounted speaker. The unit tipped, cracked, and spat out a burst of feedback before falling silent. The DJ just stood there, staring down, his phone still in his hand. One of the birds was alive but twitching. It rolled its head backward, foam leaking from its beak, and clawed blindly toward the nearest foot. The waiter it latched onto didn't move fast enough. The bird hooked its claws into his ankle and dug in hard. His pants tore. He slipped and crashed into a table, screaming and kicking, but the bird didn't let go. Another bird hit a guest directly in the neck. Blood sprayed across the side of her dress. She stumbled into the bar counter, knocking over 2 bottles of white wine. A groomsman rushed in to help, pulled the bird off with both hands, and threw it across the deck. It smashed into the glass barrier and left a smear before dropping still. Panic didn't start all at once. People assumed it was some weird freak occurrence. The wind maybe, migratory confusion. I heard someone say that. A man in a white blazer said birds sometimes get confused by light at high elevations. Then he tried to film the scene. That's when the alert tone hit the speaker system. Not from the DJ, not from anyone's phone app. It hijacked the signal directly. A flat mechanical voice came through, not loud, just clear. Emergency alert. Containment breach confirmed. Stay inside. Do not approach animals. Secure all entry points immediately. Repeat. Emergency alert. Containment breach confirmed. The words didn't land at first. The guests weren't really listening. One of the bridesmaids asked if it was part of the theme. The groom's father was still taking pictures with his tablet. Then more birds hit, fast and low, a direct sweep from the northwest. At least 10 of them. Beaks open, screeching, not scared, not evasive. They crashed through the gap in the side railing where the buffet carts had been rolled out earlier. 2 of them locked onto a waiter carrying a wine tray. He dropped it and stumbled backward, knocking over a decorative lantern. The bride had blood on her arm. I don't know if it was hers. She was sitting on the floor near the piano bench, shielding her head with both arms. Her dress was ripped down the side. One heel was snapped off. I saw her mouth moving, but no sound came out. Her hands were shaking hard. I moved, not for her, not for anyone in particular. I just didn't want to stay where I was. I grabbed 2 cloth napkins from a service tray, tied one around my neck and mouth, pulled another over my head. Dumb instinct. Probably didn't help, but I wasn't going to leave my face open. A man ran toward the rooftop stair door. It didn't open. A hotel staff member unlocked it from the inside and waved people through. His shirt was dark with blood on one sleeve, and his expression was blank. He said nothing. He just stood there with one hand on the door until the guests started pushing past him. When I walked by, I saw that his other hand was clamped over a bite on his wrist. Inside the stairwell was darker than I expected. The emergency lights hadn't kicked in. I turned back to grab my small gear bag from under the piano bench, but another group of birds came through fast. No warning. Straight into the space above the bar and into the open doorway. Someone screamed behind me. I pushed the gear bag into the stairwell with my foot and pulled the door closed. We made it down 3 flights. I counted by habit. The hotel elevators weren't moving. Power must have been cut or overridden. The guests were panicked now. Not screaming, just wide-eyed, breathless, bumping into each other as they moved. Some still held drinks. On the 55th floor, a woman tried the hallway door, and it opened into the guest wing. I shouted at her not to go, but she ran inside anyway. A minute later, I heard thumping. Not running, not doors. Something heavier. A chair or table falling. Then nothing. We stopped on the 50th. I tried my keycard from a past gig. Didn't work. One of the staff still had a MasterCard and opened the maintenance room. The lights were still good. We pulled in 4 people. Others kept going, aiming for ground level. Inside the maintenance room were towels, gloves, a few sealed masks, and a radio. Battery operated. No speaker, just a wired earpiece. I took it, turned the volume to max, and held the bud near my ear. The voice on the channel repeated the same line 3 times before cutting out. Do not approach animals. Viral aggression confirmed. Direct contact only. Feather debris and saliva may transmit. Seal rooms. Do not open stairwells to the outside. Wait for containment crews. There was no sign of any containment crew. I asked the staff member what floor had the kitchen. He said 38. I decided to try there next. We needed water, linens, maybe more gloves or bottled drinks. I left the group in the maintenance room and told them I'd knock 3 times when I got back. On 38, the hallway smelled like rotten meat and cleaning fluid. The kitchen door was ajar. I stepped through slowly, using a bar stool leg I'd picked up as a brace. The lights were flickering. 2 walk-in freezers were open. One of the shelves had been tipped. Food scattered. A bird, maybe a raven or crow, was lying dead near the prep sink. Blood pooled around it. Feathers were scattered up the wall, stuck with something sticky. One burner on the range was still hot. I grabbed gloves, bleach packets, and a stack of dry towels. I also found a roll of gaffer tape, stuffed everything into a delivery bag from the counter, and carried it back up to 50. I sealed the stairwell door with towels under the frame and tape across the hinges. I had no idea how much protection that really gave, but it was better than nothing. We rotated masks. The 2 oldest in the group took first watch while I tried to figure out what to do next. From the window in the service hall, I could see the edge of Central Park. Fire was spreading along the east side. Not structure fires. Brush, light, hot. Probably started when something knocked over a torch lamp or battery pack. Birds circled above the smoke in tight loops. They weren't behaving normally, not random, not scared of people or wind, just circling. I sat down on the tile floor and opened my gear bag, pulled out a notepad, wrote down everything I saw, what worked, what failed, what I needed if I had to move again. This wasn't a riot. This wasn't a storm. This was something else. Controlled. Spread by contact maybe. Triggered in birds first, then dogs. I didn't know if people could carry it. Not yet. But I wasn't going to wait until we found out. If this recording is heard later, and someone's still in the city, here's what worked. Use towels to block air vents and door gaps. Duct tape or gaffer tape works if you have it. Masks help, but only for short exposure. Birds respond to high tones and speaker feedback. Short bursts can interrupt their dive pattern. Dogs show no hesitation once engaged. Use locked doors. Never go toward noise. We stayed on the 50th floor for about 3 hours. One of the servers found a vending machine in the hallway storage closet and cracked it open using a wrench from a utility box. Most of it was stale chips and warm soda. I took a pack of crackers and kept the wrapper folded in my pocket so I'd remember what I ate. A couple of people started organizing supplies, but no one really talked. Every sound made someone flinch. Elevators were still frozen. The emergency phone by the stairwell was dead. A woman in our group named Mia had a scratch on her hand. Not a deep one. She said it happened when she pushed the bar cart earlier during the rooftop scramble. We rinsed it with bottled water, taped gauze over it, and left it alone. She seemed fine at first. She was quiet but calm, not shaking. Just sat cross-legged near the wall, staring at the radio and nodding every time it popped. The building made strange noises at night. Not voices, not movement. Just the pressure shifts of a huge concrete tower adjusting in the dark. Wind against metal. A few times I thought I heard something scraping, but it didn't repeat. I stayed near the door, sat on a turned-over cart, and kept the field recorder close. I marked the time manually. 1 hour, then 2, then 3. Around what I guessed was 2:30 in the morning, Mia stood up too fast and hit her shoulder against the doorframe. She blinked, disoriented, then stumbled slightly to one side and pressed her palm flat against the wallpaper. I asked if she was okay. She nodded, but her mouth didn't move. A moment later, she lowered her hand. The wallpaper tore under her fingertips. She kept going down the hall until she reached the mirror by the linen cabinet and just stared at it. I followed. She didn't respond when I called her name. Her skin was visibly changing. Her face had patches of red discoloration spreading from the temple down to the jawline. The veins in her neck were bulging, blue, taut, and visibly moving. Her pupils had dilated unevenly, the right one larger than the left. She turned slowly, as if trying to find balance, and slurred something I couldn't catch. Her lips looked dry, cracked. One side of her mouth was twitching in pulses, like a localized spasm, not a full-body tremor. Then she dropped to her knees and began coughing hard. The sound wasn't wet or congested. It was sharp, fast, with no inhale between the bursts. She clutched her stomach with both arms and curled forward onto the tile. We got gloves on and tried to help, but she flinched when touched. Her jaw clenched shut. She hissed between her teeth, eyes rolling upward. No recognition. Her muscles started to lock up. Legs first, then hands. Her fingers curled unnaturally, and her nails scraped against the floor. She bit into the inside of her cheek. Foam and blood pooled in the corner of her mouth. One of the hotel staff said we needed to move her to another room, isolate her. I agreed, but when we tried to lift her, her back arched violently, and she let out a short bark-like exhale that sounded wrong. Not human, not voluntary. She lost control of her bladder. Eyes stayed open. Skin turned pale grey across the neck and cheeks. We wrapped her in a thick bedspread from the hall closet and carried her into a maintenance annex just past the elevator shaft. It had a heavy utility door and an interior vent we taped off. None of us had medical training. Best we could do was isolate her and try to disinfect the hallway. We poured vodka from the minibar over the path and taped off the linen cabinet. One of the other guests started crying. I didn't stop him. No one else said anything. I checked the wound on Mia's hand again. It was swollen now. Black lines ran outward from the scratch, following vein paths up her wrist and into her elbow crease. There was no pus, no redness around the edges, just necrotic tissue forming under the skin. She had no fever that we could measure, but she was burning up to the touch, Breath came in gasps, limbs fully locked. Then came the worst part. She started mimicking reflex patterns. Not speech, not movement towards sound, just repetitive actions. She clicked her teeth together 3 times, stopped, then clicked again. Same timing, over and over, like a loop stuck in a broken system. Her fingers moved like she was typing or playing an invisible instrument, then froze again. Every 20 seconds or so, she would twitch once, inhale sharply, and resume the pattern. Her eyes didn't blink. I counted 29 minutes of this before her pulse faded completely. We left her body sealed in the maintenance room. We packed the gap under the door with bar towels and taped every inch. I marked it on the hallway wall with a permanent marker from the service station. That's when I realized we had to leave the building. It wasn't just animals. The virus, or whatever it was, could jump to people through scratches or contact with contaminated fluids. If Mia turned that fast from a minor cut, the rest of us were already at risk. 2 others had minor abrasions from broken glass or bird claws. They weren't showing symptoms yet, but I couldn't trust a delay. I gathered what we could: flashlights, masking tape, an extra pair of gloves, 2 small radios, both one-way, crackers, bottled water, and 3 compact fire blankets. I wrapped my feet in doubled socks and duct tape for extra grip and protection. There was no plan, only the next logical move: go down the stairs as far as we could before something forced us to stop. I led. I used the plastic food tray as a makeshift shield and carried the portable speaker in my left hand, set to a low hum frequency. One of the hotel workers carried the field recorder. Another guest held the flashlight. The rest stayed close, single file. Floor by floor we moved. The air got warmer after 39. The emergency ventilation was running on backup. No power from the main grid. Lights flickered every 5 seconds, which made shadows shift and overlap. Every open hallway we passed showed signs of break-ins or small localized fights. Turned chairs, broken frames, smeared blood trails down glass. No bodies, just signs of chaos that had already moved on. On the 34th floor, we encountered a door propped open with a broom handle. I tapped it with the tray, waited. No response. The air smelled sharp, like bleach and something sour underneath. We passed by. No one said anything. Near the 30th floor, I started hearing intermittent barking from lower levels. Not panicked barks, controlled, short, deliberate, almost patterned. I muted the speaker and signaled for the others to hold position. We crouched in the stairwell landing, bodies pressed to the wall. One of the radios picked up a channel, static, then a man's voice, panting, hard to hear. "Do not let it break skin. I said stay clear. He's not responding. We need to pull back to the service corridor." Another voice responded, calmer, sharper. "It's in the bloodstream. 1 nick is enough. Pull your gloves tighter and seal the gear. If you can't lift him without contact, leave him." Then silence. That was the last transmission. We waited 10 minutes before continuing. Everyone had duct tape over gloves, masks pulled as tight as they would go. No one argued. No one asked if we were sure. That told me everything I needed to know about how scared they really were. On the 28th floor, the stairwell was blocked with a cleaning cart shoved sideways between rails. Blood streaks ran up the metal wall in hand-width smears. A single sneaker was lodged in the corner step, still tied, no foot in it. I climbed over the rail, dropped down 1 floor, and helped the others cross. It took time. One of the older guests dropped her bag. I caught it before it hit the ground. No one said thank you. 25, then 20. The lower we got, the more damage we saw. Wall cracks, bent handrails, stale air. At one point, I thought I heard humming. Not machine humming. A person, female. Low pitch repeating. It faded before I could locate the source. On the 18th floor, we encountered our second infected human. She was lying on the stair landing between 18 and 17, wearing a cocktail dress, torn at the thigh, one leg twitching. Her skin showed the same vascular discoloration as Mia. blue veins raised under the surface like plastic wires, eyes fully dilated, no verbal response. Her jaw was slack. One hand rose and fell at the same rhythm, 6 times, then paused, then repeated. We didn't approach. I threw one of the fire blankets over her and tied it off with an extension cord. Then we climbed over using the opposite rail and didn't look back. The virus doesn't cause rage. It doesn't make people aggressive or fast. It shuts them down, turns the body into a reflex machine, looping signals, spasms, locked muscles, blood poisoning that spreads along the vascular network faster than anything natural, entry through cuts, exposure through saliva, maybe even through mucous membranes if the concentration is high enough. No cure, no treatment, no reversal. I added that to my notes as soon as we hit the service hallway on the 15th floor. We sealed it behind us and found a locked kitchen access. Forced it open. Inside were dry goods, a half-dead freezer, and an ice machine leaking into a drain. We took what we could carry and kept going. I don't know how many more were infected above us. I don't know if the rooftop group survived or if the birds came back after we left. I didn't hear gunfire. I didn't hear helicopters. Only dogs somewhere below. The deeper we go, the closer we get to street level, and the street is worse. If this spreads like it looks, then every public space in the city is already compromised. Buses, park benches, stair railings, subways, hotel lobbies, elevators. One scratch. That's all it takes. I stood in the emergency stairwell landing and held my breath for a few seconds. I didn't hear anything below. Just the low-pressure hum of wind cycling between floors, and somewhere far off, the steady hum of electrical relays trying to reset. It didn't matter. The power had gone out above the 30th. We were on the 12th floor now, and I figured anything below 10 might already be breached. I wasn't going to wait and find out while trapped between infected floors and a locked lobby. There were 5 of us left. 3 adults, 1 teenager, and the hotel maintenance man. We hadn't heard from the upper floors since the radio transmission cut out. I removed the duct tape from my mask and retied it tighter. My left cheek was raw underneath from sweat and friction. The air smelled metallic and stale. The teenager, his name was Jorge, held a crowbar and a fire blanket wrapped around his other arm. His shoes were taped at the ankles. He looked like he wanted to ask something, but didn't. We moved down 3 more floors, slow and steady. The door to the 9th had already been forced open. Blood was visible in the gap where it met the tile. I kept us going without stopping. The deeper we went, the more the temperature changed. Warmth gave way to heavy humidity. Mold or stagnant water somewhere below. At the 7th floor, the air turned dense and unpleasant. The kind of heaviness you get when too many bodies have moved through a narrow space and nothing's been vented out. When we reached the 4th floor landing, we heard barking again. Not one dog. Not random. Multiple. Controlled. Sharp. The sound bounced up through the stairwell from the lobby level. I muted the small speaker I was still carrying and had everyone back up a floor. We ducked into a janitor's closet behind the stairwell's secondary door. The hallway was pitch black, but the closet had an old floodlight running on a backup cell. Inside was a metal bucket, 2 stacks of floor towels, and a sealed plastic container with cleaning chemicals. We stayed in there for 20 minutes. No one talked. I scratched notes into the back of my field book using the sharp corner of a door key. I kept track of symptoms we'd seen, response times, and spread patterns. There were 3 stages from what I could tell. Initial exposure was subtle. Fatigue, low focus, skin sensitivity. The second stage came within 1 hour. Muscular rigidity, involuntary eye movement, temperature drop. The final stage was catastrophic nerve disruption, loss of verbal control, reflex repetition, full organ failure. Mia had gone through it in 3 hours. The woman on floor 18 had progressed faster. If either of them touched a rail or bled on fabric, the virus was now on every surface they made contact with. I wasn't sure how long it could survive on metal or synthetic fibers. No one knew that yet. We'd taped our gloves to our sleeves and doubled our socks, but it was still guesswork. My skin itched constantly from where I had cleaned bird blood off it hours earlier using cheap vodka and a hotel towel. I changed the gloves twice, and I still didn't trust them. Eventually, we moved again. I pushed the stairwell door open with my foot, keeping my body behind the edge. No movement. We descended to the second floor and waited. The lobby was right below us. The barking had stopped, which made it worse. I'd rather hear it. At least then I'd know where they were. I stepped down onto the first floor landing and listened. Something was moving inside the hallway. Not footsteps, not claws, soft drags, plastic or fabric brushing against tile. The hotel maintenance guy tapped my shoulder and pointed to the glass panel just above the landing. There was movement behind the frosted glass. A shadow passed once, then stopped. It was low to the ground, too small for a person. Then I saw a second one. It moved from right to left just out of frame. Controlled. No skittering. No fear. I backed us up 3 steps. The hallway had multiple access points. The front entrance, a side service corridor, and the basement garage. The main door was glass and useless now. If the infected animals were already inside, we weren't going out that way. We took the side corridor. The service hallway smelled of meat and metal. Not quite blood. Just enough iron in the air to remind you something was wrong. I used the flat of my palm to check the door temperature before touching the handle. No heat, no pressure change. I pushed slowly. Inside was the banquet staging area. Upside-down trays and trolleys littered the floor. Food had been scattered across the white linen tablecloths, now soaked and browned. A bird had crashed into one of the overhead track lights and gotten stuck. It twitched once when we passed, still breathing, but paralyzed. Its wings were broken in 2 different directions, and its eyes were cloudy with a layer of film. No one touched it. We moved past. I spotted the security office door across from the storage cage. It was open by a fraction. Light flickered inside. Jorge volunteered to check it. I told him to stay low and use the crowbar to wedge the door if something moved. He nodded and ducked in. He came back with a hotel walkie-talkie, 3 sealed earpieces, and a thermal emergency poncho. No bodies inside, but he said the air smelled wrong, like rotten lemon cleaner. I figured someone tried to disinfect the space and gave up. Either that or they sealed themselves in and waited too long. We moved through the back kitchen and into the receiving dock hallway. The freight elevator was jammed halfway between floors. A man's legs were visible underneath the bottom lip, twisted at the hip. Blood pooled around the base. No head. Someone must have tried to escape using the freight system, got stuck, and didn't make it. The back exit was chained, but the glass was already broken. I used the back of the crowbar to pry the bottom link and let us slip out one by one. Outside was dark. The only remaining light came from fire reflections on the clouds above Central Park and a few flickering LED signs across the street. The sidewalk in front of the hotel was torn apart. Umbrellas snapped in half. Patio chairs scattered into the street. Car alarms wailed in the distance. I didn't see any people, but we didn't wait long enough to check every angle. I picked the alley behind the neighboring building and we moved in single file, staying against the wall, no sudden movements. The side alley was narrow but clean, no garbage bags, just crushed boxes and runoff from a broken ice bin. I peeked around the corner and saw the back of a public bus tipped against a light pole. Its windshield was shattered. A yellow school zone sign was bent forward, stained red, and leaning against the front of the bus. A child's backpack lay open next to it. No movement. We crossed quickly. Glass cracked under George's boot. We froze. A pigeon flew out of the broken vending machine next to the curb, flapping loudly. I turned my head and spotted movement near a parked sedan. Something low and white-grey, hunched under the undercarriage. Then it moved. A dog. Medium size. No leash. Jaw slack. Mouth partially open. Foam strands hung from the corner of its lips. Its ears were cut or mangled. No fur around the neck. The skin looked peeled in places, but it didn't limp. It walked straight, deliberate. We backed up slowly. The dog didn't change speed. It was watching but not barking, not growling. Then it stopped at the middle of the road and looked to the left. Another appeared, slightly larger, same condition, then two more. We turned and ran, not far, just enough to break visual contact. Ducking through a dry cleaner's broken entryway, we pulled a metal rack down behind us and crawled under a folding table. I told everyone to stay low and not make noise. The walkie-talkie was muted. I left the speaker off. For the next 10 minutes we waited. The dogs didn't come in. We heard their claws against the asphalt. Once, a soft exhale through the broken glass. Then silence again. Jorge found a city map on the wall behind the service counter, Midtown grid, marked in bright blue pen from someone's delivery route. It showed a pharmacy 3 blocks over near 8th Avenue. That was our next goal. We needed antibiotics, masks, anything sealed. I figured we had 1 hour before patrols, or whatever the infected packs were, cycled back. We took the back exit through the cleaner's repair bay. I grabbed 2 empty hanger rods and a roll of packing tape, tied one to the flashlight. The other I used as a makeshift spear with a snapped-off mop handle. None of it would help much, but it gave the group something to hold. By the time we reached 8th Avenue, the wind had picked up. Trash spun across the crosswalks. The silence wasn't total, but close. No police sirens, no traffic, no helicopters, just distant alarms and the occasional burst of animal noise. We passed an overturned food cart. The propane tank was intact. I marked the location on my notepad for later. The pharmacy was dark. Metal gate pulled halfway down. I used the mop-handle spear to lift it slowly. Jorge crawled under and opened the side service door for the rest of us. Inside smelled clean. Too clean. The air had been filtered recently. Someone had tried to seal the space. The main aisle had been cleared. Masks gone. Gloves gone. Someone had looted fast and selectively, but they missed a locked cabinet behind the back counter. The key was still in the drawer. I opened it and found surgical gauze, antiseptic wipes, and a sealed tube of antiviral cream. I handed 1 pack to each person and told them not to open it until needed. We divided the gauze into smaller bags. I wrapped mine in a plastic poncho liner and secured it with tape. I wasn't planning to treat anyone. If we got scratched or exposed, we wouldn't last long enough for it to matter. But having clean supplies gave people something to focus on. The back hallway led to a fire escape. We pushed through a heavy steel door into open air. The fire escape ran down the side of a 5-story building, directly across from a closed diner. The street below was scattered with loose takeout bags, blown mail, and broken umbrellas. No bodies, no vehicles moving. Just a stalled taxi with the door open and the dome light still on. One of the front tires was flat. No blood, no signs of violence. It just looked like the driver left mid-shift and never came back. We didn't go down immediately. I took 5 minutes to watch the movement pattern of birds on the roofs to the west. I saw flocks, but they weren't flying straight. They drifted low over rooftops, dipped down, then pulled back. No call and response, no evasive patterns. They moved in deliberate loops, as if responding to a signal or fixed route. I saw one group of gulls form a wide arc and glide toward an open parking lot. They didn't land. They hovered, flapped once, then regrouped and returned to the top of a cable office building. I started to believe the birds weren't just reacting to light or movement. They were responding to something else. Maybe sound or heat or both. I pulled out the small speaker from my pack and tested a tone sweep from low to high. I kept it under 3 seconds to avoid detection. In the distance, 2 birds altered their flight slightly, like the pulse had registered, but not fully triggered anything. We descended the fire escape and crossed to the alley between the diner and a laundry service depot. I kept the speaker on my belt, volume off, fingers on the button. Jorge moved ahead with the crowbar, ducking under a bent metal pole. The street opened into a wide intersection, Broadway and West 72nd. There was a deli on the corner. The glass door had been kicked in, and the shelves inside were mostly empty, but the back of the shop still had 2 sealed coolers. I crawled through the broken entry and checked inside. Bottled water, energy drinks, 1 carton of prepackaged sandwiches, I grabbed everything that wasn't leaking and passed it out through the broken glass. We moved fast. While we were eating behind a mailbox cover near the sidewalk, I saw a group of pigeons land in a tight cluster on a traffic signal. They sat perfectly still for almost 30 seconds. Not twitching, not feeding, just perched. Then all at once they lifted off and dove straight at a second-story apartment window. The impact was loud enough to echo. Glass cracked, but didn't fully shatter. The birds veered upward, circled twice, and landed again. That was the moment I realized they were acting with intent. Birds don't behave that way without a stimulus. There was no sudden movement inside the apartment, no light switch, nothing visual. I started running scenarios in my head and kept coming back to sound. Something up there had made noise. Music maybe, a phone, a spoken word. I decided to test it. We moved to the awning beneath the next building over, an old dental clinic with barred windows and a side entrance. I found a cracked window facing the street and set the speaker on the sill, volume low. I used the toy keyboard I'd scavenged earlier and connected it by cable. I hit a high note, a sustained C sharp, then turned the speaker to face the birds. They twitched. 2 of them took off. The rest scattered a second later. The note didn't just spook them. It disrupted whatever cycle they were locked into. I tried again, this time alternating between 2 pitches, close together. D and E flat. The birds responded again, but this time in a more chaotic pattern. One crashed into a window, another lost altitude and recovered clumsily. The rest scattered in tight arcs and didn't return. I kept the information to myself for now. I didn't know how consistent it was, or whether it worked on dogs. But I had enough to go on. High-frequency tones disrupted flocking patterns, and rapid pitch changes made them unpredictable. There was no guarantee it would last more than a few seconds, but that could be the difference between an open door and an attack. We crossed Broadway in small bursts, hugging doorframes and skipping open street crossings. I scanned every rooftop twice before moving. Jorge started asking if we were going to stay in one of the apartment buildings. I told him no. Too many entry points, too many unknowns. I wanted a service building, something with limited access and locked back rooms. 2 blocks down, we found a small print shop wedged between a shuttered gym and a law office. It had a narrow lobby, a security gate, and a clean back room with no windows. I tested the lock, found it jammed, and had Jorge pry it open with the crowbar. The lights were dead, but the air inside was dry, and there were no blood marks or signs of animals. The back room had a metal file cabinet, a drafting table, and 2 folding chairs. That was enough. We barricaded the entrance using the counter display and wedged the file cabinet against the inner door. I taped all the vents and cracks with the last of the gaffer roll. I didn't speak until it was done. Then I sat down and passed around food again. While the others rested, I used the shop's emergency light and my notebook to record what I'd seen. I marked down tone frequencies, behavioral changes in the birds, and flight patterns. I made a guess that direct eye contact didn't trigger a response unless paired with movement or sound. That meant if we stayed still and didn't speak, we could theoretically move under flocks without triggering aggression, assuming they hadn't already identified us. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it gave me something to think about that wasn't blood or death or broken windows. Later that night, I heard footsteps outside. Not animal sounds, human, slow, pacing. A man's voice called out once. It was hoarse and cracked. "Anyone? Anyone here?" I didn't answer. Neither did the others. I looked through a slit between the paper-covered window panels and saw a man standing alone, facing the glass. His jacket was torn. He had a bandage across his shoulder and one arm hanging limp. He didn't try the door, just stared. Then he turned his head, and I saw the veins. Raised, black, stretching across his face from ear to eye. He wasn't coughing. He wasn't twitching. Just slow, deliberate movement and blank stare. After a full minute, he walked away. We waited 30 more before moving. That was the first time I saw someone infected stay lucid that long. Usually by the time the veins show up, the nervous system is already degrading. But this man still walked, still talked. That meant one of two things. Either the virus mutates during spread, or his exposure was partial. The second theory scared me more. If the virus had non-lethal stages, carriers could blend into survivor groups. They wouldn't be obvious. They'd talk, help, then start twitching 2 hours later. I changed my protocol that night. No one touches others. No skin to skin. No contact unless gloves and tape are in place. No exposed breath within 3 feet. If someone shows signs, they isolate immediately. I wrote it on a cardboard panel and taped it to the file cabinet. By morning, the wind shifted. It brought a new smell. Burnt plastic, garbage smoke, and something else. More industrial, chemical. Jorge said it reminded him of his uncle's shop near Hunts Point. That's where they used to burn metal scrap in big barrels behind the warehouse. The scent stuck to your clothes for hours. I believed him. We stayed still for another hour before moving. There was no bird movement, no dog sounds, no sirens. I checked the rooftops twice with the mirror shard I kept in my vest pocket. Nothing moved. Even the wind felt heavier. The streets hadn't cleared. They'd just gone quiet. That made things worse. Active danger you can react to. Stillness gets inside your head. I made the call to keep moving west. Midtown was out. Broadway felt unsafe. Too many parked cars. Too many blind corners. I wanted elevation and thick walls. Stone if possible. Somewhere with less glass, fewer vents, and doors that locked from inside. We needed shelter, not a pass-through. Someone mentioned the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. I'd passed it years ago on the way to a wedding gig in Morningside Heights. I remembered the outer doors, ironclad, heavy. The walls were stone and over a foot thick. Multiple entrances. If any building could hold up, it would be that one. We moved in staggered bursts, from the print shop to West 73rd, then down to Amsterdam Avenue. I avoided large intersections. The glass fronts were all blown out, shoe stores looted, medical dispensaries stripped to the racks. Not much left, half a body slumped behind a pretzel cart, no shirt, black pants. The skin looked waxy and tight. I didn't check the face. Near the Lincoln Correctional Facility, we found a utility cart turned over in front of the main entrance. Nothing inside. A single sneaker lodged in the wheel well. No one said anything. Not Jorge. Not the maintenance guy. He walked slower now. His ankle had been bothering him since the fire escape. Swollen. No discoloration yet. No tremors. I checked it twice a day. By the time we reached the cathedral, it was just past noon. Sky was hazy. The main door stood half open, not fully breached, just ajar. We approached slow. I sent Jorge ahead again, crouched low, crowbar in hand. No movement inside, just filtered light through dust-heavy windows. The doors creaked, but not loud. Inside smelled of old paper, melted wax, and rainwater. The place had been used. Recently. One of the pew rows had been pushed aside, and plastic sheeting hung across the side aisle like someone tried to create a quarantine zone. We found food wrappers, melted candles, and a backpack with zip ties and gauze rolls inside. No names, no bodies. A few handwritten notes in pencil on the back of printed choir sheets. One read, "Use vestibule for staging. Do not open south door unless bird sweep cleared. Avoid organ loft." That was enough for me. We blocked the south door with a row of stacked benches and wedged 2 iron candle holders across the inner lock latches. The maintenance guy checked the breaker box. No mains power, but the emergency lights in the entry worked. Battery probably. The back hallway had a series of offices, some with solid doors, no windows. I picked the one with a deadbolt and a heavy frame. I sealed the vent with altar cloth and duct tape, then used one of the folding chairs to wedge against the handle. I left a 2-inch gap for airflow near the bottom and stuffed it with a towel. Enough to breathe. Enough to hold if something tried to push in. Jorge and I checked the rest of the main chamber. No one was there. We found a pair of boots under the lectern, but no body. A bit of dried blood, small pool, looked more like a hand wound than something fatal. My guess was someone moved on, maybe joined a convoy, or didn't make it far. We regrouped in the side chapel and took stock. 4 water bottles, 2 half full, 8 packages of crackers, 2 sealed bags of trail mix, and 4 medical kits. A single backup radio, and 1 speaker still with battery left. The toy keyboard survived, still worked. I carried it like a sidearm now. Around 4, the first problem surfaced. One of the women, the quiet one with the brown jacket, started coughing. Not violent, just irregular bursts, dry, spaced out. I asked her to show her hands and forearms. No scratches, no swelling, no visible signs of exposure. I checked her eyes. No dilation. Skin tone looked normal, but her lips were dry and cracked. She said she was fine, said the cough was from nerves. I didn't challenge it, but I told her she'd need to sleep in the far office, not with the rest of us. She agreed, didn't argue. That worried me more than if she had. We split into shifts. One person watched the south entry, another watched the interior doors. I took the first turn, facing west. The cathedral windows showed the street clearly. I used a small mirror to check angles and kept my ears open for scratching or wing movement. About an hour in, I heard something strange. Not birds, not dogs. A droning hum, rhythmic, repeating every 5 seconds. I moved to the east window and saw a drone pass overhead. Black frame, no lights, maybe 4 feet across. It was too far to identify markings, but the flight was steady. It moved south to north, then veered west and disappeared behind rooftops. I wrote it down. Someone was still operating aerial surveillance. That meant pockets of order remained somewhere, maybe government, maybe private contractors, maybe the people who caused this in the first place. We stayed in the cathedral overnight. Rain hit after sundown. The water came through the broken panels in the high windows and left puddles near the choir risers. We mopped what we could with folded vestments. The coughing woman didn't get worse, but she didn't sleep. I checked on her twice. She lay on her side, breathing shallow, eyes open. When I offered food, she said no. I didn't press. I marked her status in the log and set a 5-minute timer every hour to recheck vitals. Around 3 in the morning, a loud crash echoed from somewhere inside the building. Metal on stone. I grabbed the crowbar and flashlight. Jorge stayed behind. I moved into the hallway leading toward the organ loft. The crash didn't repeat. I checked every side alcove. Empty. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw what had fallen. A brass candelabrum. It had been suspended by chain above the loft rail. The chain had rusted through. No sabotage, just failure. Still, I didn't sleep after that. In the morning, the woman was worse. Pale, lips cracked, breath unsteady. She hadn't moved from her spot. I checked her arms again. Still no swelling, but her pulse was weak. I asked if she could stand. She didn't respond. I called a group meeting in the side chapel. I explained that I'd seen the virus jump to humans through indirect contact. Surfaces, aerosol, scratches. I reminded everyone of Mia, the symptoms, the twitching, the skin changes. I said we couldn't keep taking risks, and if anyone showed more symptoms, we'd have to isolate them further or leave them behind. No one disagreed. We moved the woman to the upper choir loft, placed a water bottle and blanket near her, and sealed the stairwell with rope from the storage closet. She didn't resist. Her eyes were open but unfocused. I left the radio earpiece with her, turned to channel 2. If she had strength, she could call. Then we gathered what we could and prepared to move again. The cathedral had served its purpose. Walls held, air was clean, but the location was too exposed. Too many windows. No food, no water source, no long-term plan. I wanted to move east toward a university building. Maybe Columbia, maybe a research lab. If anyone had information about what this was, it'd be stored on one of those systems. We took a side alley out of the cathedral grounds and kept to the northern edge of 110th Street. The roads weren't empty anymore, not like the first night. We saw movement twice within the first 10 blocks. Once a single man sprinting shirtless across Frederick Douglass Boulevard, barefoot, panting, gone in seconds. No blood, no pack, just desperation. The second was worse. We passed a pharmacy that had been burned out. Not looted, not smashed, burned. Shelves collapsed inside. Steel frames blackened. Outside, someone had taped a note to the mailbox. It said, "Didn't trust her. She scratched him. Then she stopped blinking, burned the room, left him inside." I didn't stop to read it twice. By the time we reached the north end of the Columbia campus, the wind was picking up again. Not fast, but steady. Same strange smell as before. Burnt metal mixed with sterilizer. The kind of scent you catch in old hospitals before someone opens an autoclave. It came from the west, but we kept east, sticking to smaller lanes between old dormitories and lecture halls. The university gates were open. No guards, no tape, just silence and that creeping fog smell sliding between brick walls. Most of the buildings were locked. Some had reinforced glass doors with crash bars behind them. I didn't want to draw attention by forcing an entry unless we had to. I had seen too many exposed upper floors, too many classrooms without exit paths. Jorge spotted a sign near a service stairwell marked Vet Med Access, authorized personnel only. That was enough for me. A research lab might still have backup power, and anything tied to veterinary programs could be where this thing started. Birds, dogs, transmission patterns, all of it lined up too closely for coincidence. We used a maintenance keycard from one of the cathedral bags to wedge the door handle and pry the latch. Took some force, but it opened. Inside was dark and narrow, cinder block walls, no recent foot traffic. Dust hadn't settled evenly, which meant some movement had happened earlier, maybe hours before, not days. We swept each floor methodically. First level was mostly storage. Locked cages, boxes of latex gloves, expired cleaning chemicals, and stacked lab coats still in dry cleaner bags. The second level was offices, most trashed, filing cabinets bent, monitors smashed or turned face down. One room had dried blood on the floor and a chair shoved sideways against the closet. No body. The third level was different. A back room near the west stairwell still had power. Emergency lights lit a green corridor with sealed plastic doors. One was marked BSL2, Animal Observation, with a printout taped beside it showing access logs. The last entry was from the night before the birds first hit our rooftop. It read, Starling Batch P0, Feeding Response Variable Tone Index 2.1. Underneath someone had scrawled in pen, too consistent, flocks following cue without food present. I stared at that line for almost a minute. I knew enough about basic behavioral studies to get the idea. They were experimenting with audio triggers, trying to prompt feeding behavior using specific frequencies. And it worked. The birds responded, even without a reward. That kind of stimulus response pattern wasn't natural. It was designed. We opened the lab. The room was cold and smelled of bleach and disinfectant. A long table in the center had cages stacked too high, each labeled with an ID tag and a feed record. Every cage was empty. No birds, no bedding, just residue in the corners, feathers, excrement, and scratches along the metal wiring. A few had smeared blood. Someone left in a hurry. A tablet sat open on the table, still showing the last page of lab notes. I scanned it quickly. Confirmed. Flocker 7 exhibits consistent pattern change after 4-minute exposure to alternating tone sequence. Individual reactivity increases when exposure is coupled with ultraviolet pulse light. Subject stress markers increase. Aggression observed. Terminated 2 during handling protocol failure. Escalated. Aggression observed. I took the tablet and backed out. We checked the adjacent server room. No signs of breach. The monitors were off but warm. Jorge flipped the power switch. One of the screens blinked to life. The desktop showed a control panel marked stim pathway, batch control. Below that were toggle options for frequency ranges, pulse intervals, and audio loop durations. Someone had programmed this system to broadcast audio patterns, designed for birds, maybe other animals too. There were logs of test cycles, some marked as successful, some terminated with only a note, uncontrollable. I downloaded everything to the tablet and pulled the USB stick from the server tower. It was labeled only with a red sticker and 3 digits. 201. I didn't care what was on it. If it had test data, it was coming with me. We shut down the room and sealed the hallway behind us using heavy plastic wrap from the supply closet and every roll of duct tape we had left. It wouldn't stop dogs or people, but it might block out smell or spore particles if those were still in the air. The upper floors were admin offices, empty. One room had a radio tuned to a static loop. I heard a familiar voice through the fuzz, a public broadcast from 2 nights earlier. Emergency alert, pathogen containment failure confirmed, avoid wildlife contact, avoid exposed bodily fluids. If scratched or bitten, isolate immediately. This is not a drill. We already knew all that, but hearing it out loud again made the air feel heavier. That night we slept in the server room. It was quiet, dry, and had only one entrance. I rotated watch with Jorge. The others stayed bundled in the corner. We left the speaker powered down. I didn't want to draw anything with frequency tests. Not until we moved again. Around 3 in the morning, the emergency lights flickered, then died. Full black, no backup. I waited 20 seconds before turning on the flashlight. Nothing moved. We left before dawn. The university was compromised, maybe not by infection, but by the people who ran the studies. If the notes were accurate, someone had triggered aggression patterns across species lines using frequency and environmental cues. If those birds escaped, intentionally or not, the signal had already started the chain. I wrote it down before we left. Signal spread event likely tied to behavioral study using flocks as vector carriers. Exposure to repeated tone sequences causes hyper-response and aggression. Virus symptoms follow, may be linked. Project origin unknown. Starling batch P0 confirmed involved. We had all the proof we needed. The server logs, tablet notes, experiment folders, and the USB drive, labeled in marker as 201, contained the audio sequences, animal response files, and the original protocols. None of it felt like research anymore. The testing phase had ended long before we got there. What was left behind was cleanup, and whoever had run those studies wasn't coming back for their mess. We followed Riverside Drive south in pairs. Jorge walked point. I stayed second. The last of the maintenance workers, Dev, was in the rear, with the others between us. We kept off the open road and moved parallel to the sound wall until we crossed into the West 60s. That's where the smoke started again. Not the same metallic burn as before. This was thicker, more carbon, plastic, not fresh, but not old either. By the time we reached the edge of the parkway, we had passed 2 more evacuation flyers, both taped to utility poles, both marked with the same phrase, Checkpoint Pier 96, West 57th, radio scan active, no animals past this point. I didn't trust them, but I didn't have better options. The only thing that gave me pause was the phrase, radio scan. I wasn't sure if that meant thermal screening, biosignature sweep, or something worse. Maybe something that could identify behavioral changes before physical symptoms showed. The others wanted to try it. I said I'd go ahead alone and check it out first. Jorge handed me the radio, and Dev gave me the last of the hand sanitizer. I took the tablet and USB stick. No food. Just documents and the old speaker, wrapped tight in cloth and sealed in the bottom of my pack. I moved east on 57th and hugged the side of the sanitation depot. The streets were clearer than I expected. That made me more cautious. I passed 3 open cars, 2 with shattered windows, 1 with a blood smear across the passenger door, but no body. Then I reached the corner where 11th Avenue turned toward the water and stopped. Ahead of me, a roadblock stretched across the entire pier entrance. Black shipping containers stacked too high with chain link fencing between them, A single bus, stripped of wheels and wedged sideways as reinforcement. Barrels burned low behind the fence. Light shimmered in the haze. A generator hummed just beyond view. But no guards. I stepped forward, slow. A motion-activated camera on a metal pole tilted slightly and beeped. A voice crackled through a nearby speaker. Automated, male, short sentences. Approach slow. Drop all gear at yellow tape. Remove masks. Hands raised. I hesitated, looked for the source. Nothing moved beyond the fence. No silhouettes, no rifle barrels. Just that voice on a loop. I stepped back out of range and ducked behind the sanitation office, pulled out the map. It showed a utility building 2 blocks north, former MTA broadcast relay point, sealed 5 years ago after the radio conversion. If the power still ran, I could bounce a narrow signal off it and reach repeaters along the Upper West Side. That would be enough. If no one was listening yet, someone eventually would. I went north alone. Jorge stayed back with the others, just like we agreed. I told him I'd return within 4 hours. If I didn't, they were to move east, avoid dogs, keep low, and stay off main avenues. Never speak more than a whisper. And if they were caught, scratch, bite, symptoms, he was to isolate them immediately. No hesitation. The broadcast tower was sealed with a reinforced keypad. I broke the side panel open and hot-wired the latch using 2 jumper leads I'd salvaged from a printer back at the university. The door opened slowly. The inside was dry and cold. No lights. I turned on my headlamp and stepped inside. The stairwell reeked of dust and burned electronics. Something had surged through the breakers years ago and no one had fixed it, but the emergency box still blinked red. That meant battery storage remained, just enough to run low-draw equipment. I moved up 3 levels and found the main control room. Everything was covered in tarp and zip ties. I cleared one of the workbenches, pried open the transmitter housing, and slotted the USB stick into the side port. The screen flickered. A list of batch codes appeared, then audio clips. I picked the last labeled entry. It was a 21-second tone loop marked 2.1 intermittent, confirmed avian reaction. I didn't activate it yet, just cued it. Then I opened the microphone input and began speaking. If you're hearing this, I've accessed a relay station west of Midtown. I have recovered lab notes, test logs, and data from the original behavioral study. This outbreak began with controlled audio experiments on avian subjects, starlings. Batch number P0. The test was conducted by personnel linked to an unnamed behavioral sciences program at Columbia University. Records suggest tone-based stimulation prompted aggression without external threat. Notes describe reflex imitation, loss of inhibition, coordinated movement. They tested it for crowd dispersion. It evolved, or something changed. If you have access to safe zones, print these words and post them at entry points. Avoid sound over 2.1 kHz. Do not enter flock zones. Avoid all carriers, avian and mammalian. Symptoms escalate within 1 hour of exposure. I stopped the feed and saved it. Then I hit the loop command and began transmitting the tone on a 20-minute interval. Short bursts, low draw, low gain. If it worked, it would alert flocks and allow survivors to predict behavior. If it backfired, they'd find this place and tear it apart. Either way, the signal would stay on. The speaker batteries would last 72 hours at that cycle. Maybe longer if the solar backup on the roof still worked. I left the recording playing, wrote the instructions on the wall in permanent marker, then I backed out. When I reached 61st, Jorge wasn't there. A small bundle of rope and 2 radios sat tucked under a bench near the stairs. A note in torn notebook paper sat on top. 2 of them coughed. I isolated them in the boiler room. Dev didn't come back from water run. Going east. We'll hold at the blue loading bay if you return. If not, I'll keep them safe. I folded the note and kept it. I stayed near the rooftop of an old rehab center for the rest of the day. Ate the last of the trail mix. Wrote out the final notes in my log. If I stayed, I could monitor the signal, shift frequencies, adjust loops. I'd be surrounded by concrete, steel doors, No open windows. Safe maybe, but alone. And I couldn't guarantee the broadcast would reach the next block, let alone the borough. If I left, I'd risk being pulled into another bad corridor, another exposed intersection, another silent group of people walking without blinking. But I didn't come this far to become a relay technician. So I locked the terminal behind me, taped the instructions to the inner wall, posted the signal map by the stairwell. Then I picked up the crowbar, wrapped the speaker in my vest, and started east toward the blue loading bay. Someone had to carry this forward, not because it would save the city, not because it would undo what happened, but because truth, once spoken, doesn't get unspoken. And I'd rather be the one to carry it than let it burn in a dead room under the weight of wires and silence. That's all for now, survivor. Thanks for listening. If you want to keep these stories alive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. And a huge thank you to everyone supporting this channel with extra memberships, especially Rangers and Legends, Carlos Herrera, Luca Mod, thanks. Also drop a comment and let me know what story you want to hear next. Jack's Nightmares signing off.